What kind of world sells a young man like livestock in front of his own town? That was the question burning in the air as 19-year-old Thomas Whitmore stood on the wooden platform with his hands tied and his future hanging by a thread. The sun beat down on Millfield's dusty Main Street, and the crowd pressed in close, whispering about the boy whose life was being auctioned off to pay his father's gambling debts. Thomas tried to keep his head high, but shame burned inside him. His father's debt to Vincent Cray had reached $800. Cray was the cruelest man in 3 counties, and when a Whitmore couldn't pay, Cray always made sure the whole town knew it. Thomas had never done anything wrong. He had never even kissed a girl. Yet here he was, being sold like property. 3 bidders stood in front of the platform: Old Man Peterson from the copper mine, Jake Morrison from the ranch where workers rarely lasted more than a few months, and a woman Thomas had never seen before. She wore a dark blue dress and a wide hat. Her auburn hair caught the sun, and her green eyes never left Thomas. She looked strong, not in a loud way, but in the kind that came from surviving more than people knew. The bidding started fast. Peterson offered $200. Morrison raised it to $250. Then the woman lifted her hand and said $300 in a calm voice that cut through the noise. People murmured. Women did not bid at debt auctions. Not in Millfield, not anywhere nearby. Peterson fought back with $350. Without hesitation, the woman answered with $500. The crowd gasped. That was more than most people earned in a full year. Peterson stepped back, annoyed. Morrison hesitated, then quit too. The woman stood still as the auctioneer raised his hammer. Thomas felt his heart pounding. He didn't know her. He didn't understand why she wanted him. He didn't know if she was merciful or cruel or careless. But she looked at him as though he mattered, and no one had looked at him like that in a long time. Sold to the lady for $500. The hammer fell, and everything Thomas knew ended. When the ropes around his wrists were cut, he rubbed the red marks and watched the woman approach. Vincent Cray counted the money with a greedy smile. The woman didn't look at Cray, only at Thomas. "My name is Clara Delmont," she said. "You're coming with me." Her voice was steady, not harsh, not soft, just sure. Thomas followed her to a small wagon waiting at the edge of town. As they rode away, he noticed 3 men on horseback watching from a distance. Their faces were hard, and they didn't look like they were there by accident. He had seen those same men near Vincent Cray earlier that week. Something twisted in his stomach, but he didn't speak on it yet. Clara guided the wagon with calm hands. The silence stretched, and Thomas finally asked the question he feared most. "What do you expect from me, ma'am?" Clara didn't look at him at first. "Can you read and write?" "Yes." "Can you handle livestock?" "A little." "And can you work hard without complaining?" "Yes, ma'am," he said quickly. She gave him the smallest smile. "Good. I need help on my ranch." Her ranch. Thomas tried to imagine it. Probably a small place, old fences, a few cattle, nothing fancy. But when they reached the hill overlooking her land, his breath caught. The ranch stretched across the valley like a dream. Green pastures, strong fences, a large house with a wraparound porch, cattle moving peacefully under the afternoon sun. "This is yours?" he asked. "Every acre," Clara said. Her voice warmed with pride. "My husband and I built it. I've run it alone for 2 years now." Thomas stared, amazed. Most widows sold their land and moved back with family. Clara stayed. Clara worked. Clara fought. But something else pulled his attention. Fresh wagon tracks near the house. Deep ones. New ones. They led straight to Clara's porch. "Someone's been here," Thomas said. Clara went still. Her hand slipped under her coat, and he saw the outline of a pistol. "Stay close," she whispered. "And don't do anything foolish." They climbed down carefully. The front door stood open. The curtains in an upstairs window fluttered even though the window should have been closed. Clara moved inside first, pistol ready. The house was not destroyed, but it had been searched. Every drawer open, papers scattered. The safe unlocked and empty. Someone had been hunting for something valuable, but it wasn't money or jewelry. "They wanted my land papers," Clara said softly. Her face was tight, her eyes sharp. They were looking for something specific. Thomas bent to pick up a paper from the floor, but Clara grabbed his wrist. Her touch sent a shock through him. It was the first time any woman had touched him since his mother died. "Don't touch anything yet," she said. "We need to see what else they did." They moved through the house room by room. The kitchen was torn apart, the office even worse. Upstairs, her bedroom had been searched too, though nothing of real value was missing. Thomas watched Clara carefully and noticed something unsettling. She kept touching her left shoulder. When she turned slightly, he saw a dark stain on her dress. "Clara," he whispered, "you're hurt." She froze. "It's nothing." "It isn't," he said. "You're bleeding." Quote. Her eyes flicked to his, and for the first time since buying him, she looked unsure. "There was a man before the auction. He tried to force me to give up my papers." Thomas felt anger flare in his chest, a hot, sharp feeling he'd never felt before. Someone had hurt her. Someone had tried to scare her. Someone had followed her home. "Let me see the wound," he said. "That isn't appropriate," she said. "You said you needed help," Thomas replied. "Then let me help." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Clara nodded. "Fine. The medical kit is in the pantry." As Thomas prepared to bandage her wound, he realized something he never expected. He wasn't afraid of being owned. He was afraid of losing her. What kind of man walks into danger for someone he barely knows? Thomas didn't think he was that kind of man. Not until Clara sat before him in her kitchen, her shoulder exposed, and he saw the deep cut running across her skin. It wasn't a simple scratch like she had claimed. It was a wound made by someone who wanted to frighten her, or worse. Thomas cleaned the cut with shaking hands. He had never been this close to a woman before, never tended to anyone except his mother in her final days. Clara sat still except for the sharp breaths she took when the cloth touched tender flesh. "How did this happen?" Thomas asked quietly. Clara looked away. "A man was waiting for me before the auction. He had a knife and wanted to know where I kept my land papers. When I fought him off, he managed to cut me." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Thomas asked. Clara let out a tired breath. "In this town, people only help when it benefits them. And some of them want my land just as badly as the men who broke in." Thomas wrapped the bandage around her shoulder with careful hands. He tried not to stare at the soft curve of her neck or the freckles on her collarbone, but it was impossible not to notice. She looked strong, but she also looked lonely in a way that tugged at something inside him. When he tied the bandage, Clara met his eyes. "Thank you, Thomas." "You shouldn't be handling this alone," he said. "You need help." Quote. She gave a sad smile. "I know, that's why I bought you." Thomas blinked. "I thought you bought me because you needed a worker." "I do," Clara said, "but I also needed someone I could trust. Most men in this county want my land, not to help me keep it." Thomas hesitated. Then he asked the question that sat heavy in his chest. "Why didn't you sell? You could have left all this behind." Clara's eyes softened as she touched the windowsill. "My husband and I built this ranch from nothing. We dreamed about a family. We tried for 5 years." Her voice trembled. "We lost 3 babies. When Samuel died in a riding accident, I almost sold the land. But it was all I had left of him, and all I had left of the family we wanted." Thomas felt something tighten inside him, grief mixed with admiration. Clara wasn't just strong. She was holding onto her whole heart with both hands. Before he could speak, a sound cut through the room. Hoofbeats. Clara's head snapped toward the window. "They're here." Thomas grabbed the rifle she'd given him earlier. Clara moved beside him, her movements smooth despite her injury. She peered through the curtain and her jaw tightened. 3 men, she whispered. "Harrison's riders." "Who's Harrison?" Thomas asked. "Marcus Steele's foreman," Clara answered. "He's the one who handles the dirty work." Thomas felt the hot, angry knot in his chest grow tighter. "They're after your land." "And now they're after you," Clara said. Thomas barely had time to respond before Harrison's voice boomed across the yard. "Clara Delmont! Come out now, and maybe we won't burn your house to the ground." Clara raised her rifle. "They don't want to talk." Thomas positioned himself at another window, gripping the gun so tight his knuckles went white. Fear pounded in his veins, but it wasn't enough to drown out something stronger. He wanted to protect her. More hoofbeats approached. Clara's breath caught. "Thomas," she said, "there's another one, around back." Before Thomas could warn her, the sound of footsteps creaked across the back porch. A man eased the kitchen door open, his knife glinting in the dim light. The same man who had cut Clara earlier. Thomas didn't think. He moved. He swung the rifle hard, cracking it against the attacker's skull. The man dropped instantly. Clara turned toward Thomas, shock and gratitude flashing in her eyes. "Good work," she whispered, but there was no time to celebrate. "Time's up, Clara," Harrison shouted. "Boys, burn it!" Flames burst across the porch. Another torch crashed through the window. Smoke filled the room fast. "We have to get out," Clara coughed. Thomas grabbed her hand. It was the first time he ever grabbed a woman's hand in his life, and it happened while her home burned around them. "The roof," Clara said. "There's a way onto the kitchen roof." They ran up the stairs, smoke chasing their heels. Clara pushed open a window. They climbed out onto the shingles as fire crawled along the porch below them. The barn was burning too. Horses screamed inside. Clara's face twisted in heartbreak. "They're destroying everything," she whispered. Thomas scanned the property. Men with torches crowded the front. The yard was open except for one thing. "The root cellar," he said. "Can we get into it?" Quote. Clara nodded shakily. "There's a tunnel. My husband dug it to the creek." She looked at him, desperation in her eyes. He looked back, and something inside him hardened. "I'll cover you," Thomas said. "You'll die if you do," Clara whispered. "Maybe," Thomas said, "but you won't." Something broke open inside Clara. Something she had held shut for years. She stepped close, cupped the side of his face, and kissed him. It was quick and full of fear, but it was the first kiss Thomas ever had, and it changed everything. "Don't you dare die on me," she whispered. Before Thomas could answer, movement flickered near the tree line. Another attacker stepped out, raising a rifle at Clara. Thomas didn't think. He jumped. He tackled the man off the roof. They crashed to the ground in a cloud of dust. Thomas fought with everything he had, blocking a punch, then swinging the rifle like a club. The man went still. Clara slid down the roof behind him, landing hard but steady. "Thomas, are you hurt?" "I'm fine," he said, breathless. "Go." They ran. Every second felt like a stolen miracle. Bullets could have flown any moment. But Harrison's men were distracted by the burning house. Clara reached the cellar and yanked it open. They slipped inside, shutting out the light and noise. The darkness swallowed them as they climbed into the hidden tunnel. The ranch burned above them, but they were alive, and they were running together. What kind of love is born in fire, danger, and running for your life? Thomas didn't know, but as he crawled through the narrow tunnel behind Clara, her hand reaching back to make sure he stayed close, he felt something growing inside him that was stronger than fear. It was the first time in his life he had someone worth fighting for. They emerged from the tunnel near the creek. The cold night air hit their faces as they crouched low behind tall grass. Behind them, Clara's ranch glowed orange, flames rising into the dark sky. Men shouted orders. Horses screamed. The life Clara had built with her late husband was turning to ash. Clara stared at the fire, tears shining in her eyes. "It's all gone," she whispered. Thomas knelt beside her. "No, as long as you're alive, it isn't gone. You can rebuild." Clara inhaled shakily. "I can't do it alone." "You won't have to," Thomas said. Before she could respond, they heard hoofbeats. Harrison's men were searching along the creek bank. Clara grabbed Thomas's wrist and pulled him deeper into the water, using the current to erase their tracks. They moved slowly, step by step, until they reached a fallen log across a shallow pool. "There," Clara whispered. Under the log, They ducked under the waterlogged wood, their bodies pressed close in the tight space. The cold waters soaked their clothes, but Clara's warmth against Thomas kept him steady. Torchlight flickered across the water above them as the riders approached. Harrison's voice carried across the creek. "Steele wants the woman alive. The boy, too. Spread out." Clara's breath hitched. Her forehead rested gently against Thomas's. He could feel her trembling. He gently touched her hand beneath the water, and she squeezed his back. "Thomas?" she whispered so quietly he barely heard her. "Back at the house, when you said you weren't leaving, was that true?" "Every word," he whispered. Her lips brushed his cheek. "I needed to hear that." The riders passed. The light faded. For a while they stayed hidden under the log, listening to the night and each other's breathing. When they finally crawled out, shivering but alive, Clara took his face in both hands. "Thomas," she said, "what you were going to tell me before they showed up. What was it?" Quote. He swallowed hard. His heart beat louder than gunfire in his chest. "I love you," he said. "I know it makes no sense. I know my life was nothing before you. But when you kissed me, when you fought for me, I knew I'd die for you." Clara's breath caught. Her green eyes filled with tears. She leaned in and kissed him, slower this time, deeper. When she pulled back, her voice shook. "It isn't crazy," she whispered, "because I love you too." Quote. Before Thomas could speak, Clara rested her forehead against his. "You're not some boy I bought. You're the man who saved me, the man who stood beside me, the man I choose." The danger around them still pressed close, but in that moment, the fear faded. The world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them in the moonlit creek. "We have to go," Clara said finally. "Carson City. The territorial marshal. If we don't make it there, everything we've done is for nothing." Thomas nodded. "Lead the way." They moved through the darkness, sticking to the creek bed in the shadow of trees. They walked until the sky began to lighten with dawn. No horses, no supplies. Only each other and the will to survive. By morning, Clara's shoulder throbbed, and Thomas helped her walk as the pain grew worse. "We'll stop soon," he said. "Just long enough to rest." But Clara shook her head. "Not until we're safe." 2 days passed. They slept in hidden places. They moved only when it was safe. Sometimes Thomas carried her when her strength faded. Sometimes she held his hand when fear crept in. Every mile they walked together carved something deeper between them. On the third morning, the gates of Carson City appeared through the dusty haze. "We made it," Clara whispered. Thomas held her tighter. "Together." Inside the marshal's office, Clara revealed the documents she had hidden before Steele's men searched her house. Deeds, forged contracts, lists of victims, names of hired men who had burned out families across the region. The marshal listened carefully, nodding as he read each page. "You brought enough evidence to bury Marcus Steele for life," he said, "and Harrison too." Clara's shoulders relaxed for the first time since Thomas had met her. "You'll both be protected now," the marshal said. "You did the right thing." The next months changed everything. Arrest warrants were issued. Cray was taken in chains. Harrison and his men were captured after a shootout near the state line, and Marcus Steele was sentenced for enough crimes to keep him locked away forever. Clara and Thomas used what remained of the ranch's insurance and help from neighbors who finally saw the truth. They rebuilt everything the fire had taken, but this time, Thomas wasn't a servant or a debt marker. He became Clara's partner, and soon after, her husband. 6 months later, Thomas stood beside Clara on the porch of their new home. The evening sun painted the fields gold. Clara's head rested on his shoulder, her hand entwined with his. "No regrets?" Clara asked quietly. "You lost your freedom that day at the auction." Thomas smiled, pulling her closer. "Being alone isn't freedom," he said. "Choosing who your heart belongs to, that's real freedom." Clara looked up at him with those green eyes that had changed his life. "And who does your heart belong to?" "You," he said simply, "always you." She kissed him, slow and warm, the kind of kiss that promised forever. Thomas had been sold like property, but in Clara's arms he found something worth more than any land or money. He found home,